Hello, everybody, and welcome to Chapter 1, Lecture 1 of Sociology. This first chapter is basically an introduction to what sociology is, specifically what we mean by the sociological perspective. If you've taken psychology, you've learned about human behavior from a particular perspective. So I like to describe sociology and psychology as when I started teaching, I argued they were opposite sides of the same coin. Both disciplines seek to answer the same question. Both disciplines seek to understand and make predictions about human behavior. Psychology is sort of on one end of that spectrum, and focuses on the individual and the individual level, all the way down to the individual brain cell. Sociology is at the other end of that continuum and argues really that there's no such thing as an individual, that we are a compilation of all of our life experiences, everyone we've ever known, the social forces, our society, our government, the religion in our culture. So both of these are different perspectives of human behavior. And so I put these so in order to sort of emphasize what we mean by perspectives, here's a couple different ways of thinking about them. One of the assignments, actually, that you're going to see, one of the discussion posts in the online version of sociology, is this image right here. And I ask you to think about what is sociological about this image. And sort of I'll just kind of tell you the answer to that question, right? And both of these, though, if I'm looking from one perspective and I see this part right here, the orange shading, right, it would look as if it was a square. If I see the blue shading, it would look as if it's a circle. And both of those are true, right? Both of those are true. Neither of them offer a complete understanding. So what I think about the value of taking both psych and soc is it gives us a more complete understanding, a more complete perspective of human behavior. My experience since I've been teaching this for 20 some years is that some students will really, really like the sociological perspective. It will make sense. They have what we'll talk about in another slide, called the sociological imagination. Other students, not so much. They will find they won't find the perspective to be as insightful necessarily. They'll prefer, so kind of a little bit like the 6 and the 9. I think some of this depends probably on where you sit in society and your experiences, how you come up on this phenomena. So in the 6 and the 9 down here, the person, this little character here, he approaches this figure from this perspective and it looks like a 9. This fellow approaches it from this perspective and it looks like a 6, right? There's also an old, I don't know, proverb maybe, I don't know the technical term, old story about the 4 blind men. And the 4 blind men came upon this elephant and they were trying to figure out what this was. And the guy at the front who touches the trunk, he thinks it's a log. The guy at the back who's at the tail thinks it's like a snake or a rope. This person who comes up on the side of it thinks it's a wall. All of them are wrong, right? Because their perspective is very narrow. So what I think is important to say to students at the outset of the of sociology who have not who've not taken any sociology before is I hope you will give it a chance. I hope you will sort of, when you're confronted with ideas from the sociological perspective that you don't necessarily embrace, I hope you'll take a step back and sort of look at a bigger picture and adopt. And this is, I actually evaluate students in this class on their ability to take a sociological perspective and to use their sociological imagination. And can you see the bigger picture here? So again, in psychology, where you're asked to consider the relationship between a couple molecules, and it's less theoretical, and it's more like this is how this works. The sociological imagination really challenges you to look at things in a way that you have, quite honestly, a lot of the sociological imagination is in conflict with some of the messages that we get in our culture about the way things work. We're told in our culture, for instance, to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you can be anything you want to be. The sociological imagination says that's not really true, that you can be what you can be is determined by your social context, right? The things that we experience in our personal life, what I forget, I should know off the top of my head, the theorist who uses the phrase, the relationship between our personal troubles and public issues, the things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, personal, uh, the the challenges that we face, paying for our utility bills or accessing healthcare or getting a job, or even in some of our relationships, these are personal troubles, but they are situated in larger social contexts, and they may be the cause of larger public issues. For instance, the best example is you want the personal struggle to find a job that enables you to have a family life and to pay all of your bills, right? We experience this on an individual personal level, but there are larger social forces, the availability of these kinds of jobs, the legal minimum wages, the family policies that jobs have. These are public issues. We are experiencing them on an individual, on a personal level. So, in order to make this relationship, in order to recognize the relationship between our personal troubles and the public issues, we have to we have to have an imagination and look and take a big picture. So, you probably heard the phrase, can't see the forest for the trees. What I'm asking you to do all semester long is look at the forest. And if you can't see the forest, then we've got to take a few steps back, right? And we're going to be looking at, and this is another really, really important sociological point, we're going to be looking at patterns. We're going to be patterns in the data. There's a tendency sometimes for folks to say, when we start talking about social forces, and they'll say, well, that can't be true because that didn't happen to me. That is what we call an ecological fallacy. And and because that doesn't happen to you, right, that doesn't negate the larger pattern. It's like anything else. It does a pattern. You don't have to have 100% of something um, in order to recognize there's a larger pattern. One of the first things, let me see what's in the next couple slides. One of the first activities I ask you to do, and in the face-to-face class, I spend a little bit more time emphasizing this role of a pattern, is I ask you to look around the room in which you are sitting right now and look very closely at, hopefully you're in a room with people. If you're not in a room with people, the next time you're in a room with people, you'll need to do this exercise. But look very closely at the people around you, the way the people around you are dressed, what they have, the way they're wearing their hair, so their social artifacts, their backpacks, their shoes, their hair, their makeup, how they're acting, and notice if there's no, not notice if, because there will be. Look for the patterns, right? Notice where their boys are sitting? Where are the girls sitting? Are the girls all acting a certain way? Is there a pattern in how the boys are acting? What are they wearing? Notice the one thing that when I did this in my face-to-face class just the other day, was somebody observed shoes, that all of one group of people had similar color shoes and another group of people had a different color shoes. We observed that there were certain items on the desks. All the girls had certain items, but the boys had different items, right? So I invite you to take a few minutes and look very closely, and you may have to look a little while for the patterns, and look at where the students are setting, right? How are the students acting? Are there faculty members in the room? Maybe there's more than one faculty member in the room. Where are they? How are they acting? So sociology is about the patterns, right? Not the individual. And in order to see those patterns, we have to take a big picture, right? You don't see patterns if you're looking at one or two necessarily. But when we take a big picture back and we look at the whole room, right? When we use our sociological imagination, the social context, see what kind of patterns you notice there. And I'm going to stop right there at the end of the end of lecture 1.